Good afternoon, students. My name is Abhishek Mukherjee, and I'm a teacher of English of Pritish Chandra Memorial School. We are going through a very tough time. As you all know, that the pandemic outbreak of COVID-19, which is also known as coronavirus, and we are all home quarantined for 21 days as instructed by the Indian government. And I congratulate you for being promoted to class 12, and I hope that you have already started your studies of the other subjects. So we decided with the teachers of SCMS, we decided that why not to um, help you with your studies with video classes online. Today, I am going to start a chapter from one of your books of your 12 syllabus, that is the last lesson. As you know that you have got two books in your class 12 syllabus, Flamingo and Vistas. So I'm going to start the first chapter from your Flamingo book, that is the last lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Alphonse Daudet, a French novelist and a short story writer. He was born in the year 1840 and died in the year 1897. The last lesson, the story, is a very interesting story according to me. And why it is interesting? Because the background of the story is historical. And you all know that when I start any topic, I always go for a small background. So the background of the story, last lesson, is in the year 1870, in the month of July 1870, till the year 1871, in the month of May, in this 1 year, lot of things changed in France because of the Franco-Prussian War. Franco-Prussian War, it happened between 1870 to 1871. It lasted for 1 year. Franco-Prussian War changed the lives of the French people. Franco-Prussian War happened between the Second French Empire and the German Confederation. As a result, the Treaty of Frankfurt was signed, the French Empire fell, and the German Empire rose, and the German Empire captured few provinces of France. This is the story of two provinces of France named Alsace and Lorraine. So as you know, after the Treaty of Frankfurt, it was told, a news came from Berlin, that no school will be allowed to teach French from that day. Now, if it happens with you, what will happen? If you have been called someday, and if you have been told someday that you cannot talk on your mother tongue, you cannot learn your mother tongue, your native language, then how do you feel? The same thing is happening in the story, the last lesson. You know, after a war, the condition of any state, any country, it not only changes with political, not only the political system changes, not only the economical system changes, but also the social change. And in this story, you will find a very important part of social change, that is the linguistic identity. Linguistic identity, what is linguistic identity? Linguistic identity is, suppose if you speak in Bengali, you will be called as a Bengali speaker. If you speak in Hindi, you will be called as a Hindi speaker. That is your identity, that you are known for. The last lesson beautifully brings out the human tendency to postpone the learning of things, feeling that there is plenty of time to do so, but they do not realize when the doomsday will dawn and bring an end to our hopes and aspirations. With this note, I would like to start the brief summary of the last lesson by Alphonse Daudet. In this story, you'll have two characters. A school-going boy named Franz, F-R-A-N-Z. It's not pronounced at France, it's Franz. And a teacher who is serving his school for the last 40 years. So it is the last day, the last class of the teacher, Monsieur Hamel. Monsieur, the word is a French word which means Mr. or Sir. And it is also the last French class for the student of that school in Alsace. Everybody came to know about the news except the school going boy, Franz. Franz is a kind of a boy who does not want to go to school, who is reluctant to studies, who always postpones his learnings. So the narration starts with Franz when he says that he thought to skip the school for that day, and he thought to enjoy the day in open field by enjoying the chirping of the birds and being with nature, hear the drills of the Prussian soldiers, which were very much tempting for Franz, more than going to school and attend the class of Monsieur Hamel, because Monsieur Hamel on that day he was supposed to take a test on participles, and Franz was not at all prepared for the test. He was underprepared. So he was frightened. He was frightened for the scoldings from Monsieur Hamel. So at first he thought to skip the school. But an external force somehow motivated him and he thought of going to school. So while he was going to school, he found some considerable changes on his way. At first he found that on the town hall is a very important place, a main place you can say. On the town hall there was a bulletin board. Bulletin board is a kind of board from where you get all the news. And at the time of war, since I am talking about during the war, it was 1870 to 1871. So the bulletin board used to pass all the information and all the news. So while he found that there was some crowd in front of the bulletin board, Franz thought that it could be the same thing like the rules, the new rules and regulations by the Germans and the orders of the commanding officer. So without noticing anything, he thought of going to school because he was already late and he woke up late this morning. So while he was going to school, he found some changes, but he did not notice it properly. So out of his breath when he reached school, because he was already late, as I said, he found the school environment to be very different, unlike any other days. In the other days, he used to, unlike the other days, he would hear the noise of hustling and bustling, the commotion, the opening and closing of the desks, the rapping of the ruler of the teacher, okay, the noise, all the other noise. He would have expected that day. He was expecting that day. But when he reached the school, he found it to be a very different day. He found it to be a very similar with a Sunday morning. A Sunday morning which means that you will get no noise. It was absolute silence. And the day was different. At first he thought that he would somehow reach to his seat without getting noticed by anyone. But the moment he found that every student was sitting on their places, Monsieur Hamel was already in his class. He had no other choice but to face Monsieur Hamel. And he entered his classroom, and suddenly Monsieur Hamel's reaction surprised him. He was thinking that Monsieur Hamel would scold him and he would get angry on him. But Monsieur Hamel said that he was waiting for Franz and he was about to start his class. So Franz, although it was very surprising for him, he did not notice and he sat on his bench. Suddenly he found the class to be very, very silent. Everybody was in a solemn mood. Solemn mood means a very serious mood. He wasn't understanding what was happening. One thing which Franz noticed, that the back benches which remains empty on the other days, it was filled by some students, but not from his class. The students were not his classmates. They were the old postmaster, the old hosher, okay, the former mayor, all the old villagers. They were sitting on the last bench. He was quite surprised, but he did not ask anyone. That time he noticed that Monsieur Hamel was wearing a green coat, a frilled shirt. You might have seen frilled shirt, the French people sometimes they wear, and a silk hat. He was surprised to see Monsieur Hamel with this attire because he generally wears it on the special occasion. And he was thinking that what special occasion that day could be. Suddenly he found that all the other old villagers, they were opening their books. They brought some books from their home and they were trying to read, although they could not because they were very old. So while every other detail, every other thought was striking on his mind, suddenly Monsieur Hamel stood up and he addressed the class by saying that that day is the last class by Monsieur Hamel and for the students, because the notice have come from Berlin that no other school in Alsace and Lorraine will teach French language, and from tomorrow onwards a German teacher will come and he will teach German. That was ear splitting for Franz. He was not expecting this. He was surprised with the news. He did not know how to react. He could not understand what to say. But he could now understand everything what he saw since morning. He could join all the missing links. And he understood that why there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board, why everybody was so solemn in mood while he reached the school. He understood that why the backbenches are not empty today, why the villagers came. He understood that the villagers came just to pay their tribute to the teacher who has served in the school for the last 40 years. While he was thinking all this after the news, he thought that will he not be allowed to study the language again? Will he not be allowed to come to school again? How could someone do with him? How could someone put this to another person? So while he was thinking all these things, he thought that he was ashamed of himself by skipping his studies. He was ashamed of himself while thinking that he should not have gone in search of the eggs from the bird's nest, or he should not have means enjoying the SARS. He could have studied at that moment. He was ashamed of himself. While he was thinking all these things, suddenly his name was called by the teacher, Monsieur Hamel. He was asked to recite some of the part from the book, and he understood that his turn has come now. Now he has no other way but to face Monsieur Hamel, and he fumbled on his very first words, and he was waiting for the scolding from Monsieur Hamel. He was very frightened. He was holding his bench. He was ashamed, and he was waiting for the scolding from Monsieur Hamel. But with his utmost surprise, Monsieur Hamel did not scold him. He says that this is where, Franz, you stand now. You skipped your studies, you skipped your lessons, you skipped your learnings, and this is where you stand now. Now, the Prussian soldiers, they can easily say that you consider yourself as Frenchmen and you do not know how to spell or how to speak. Monsieur Hamel kept on blaming himself. He kept on blaming the parents because the parents were not anxious enough to send their children to school. Even Monsieur Hamel says that he sometimes gave holiday to the students. So everything was when Monsieur Hamel was saying. Suddenly he starts talking about the French language, how beautiful it is, how logical it is, how beautifully the language unites us, everything. And he started his last class on that day. He started his lesson. He started his lesson for the students of that day. So Monsieur Hamel started taking the class by a grammar lesson. After the grammar, he started writing lesson. That day Monsieur Hamel brought copies for the students, and in all the copies it was written France Alsace, France Alsace. They were asked to rewrite the words again and again on the copy, France Alsace, to get that patriotic feeling among the students. That day, while Monsieur Hamel was taking the class, Franz noticed that the classroom was in absolute silence. Nobody was moving. Even the slightest sound could be heard. The pigeons were not making any noise. And they were thinking that will the Germans will also make the pigeons sing in German? Can the German soldiers force the nature to change? But no. Suddenly he looked at Monsieur Hamel while he was writing. He looked Monsieur Hamel and he saw that Monsieur Hamel was sitting motionless. He was looking at the things in the classroom, the benches, the walnut trees, what he planted outside his classroom, and it looked like Monsieur Hamel was trying to get all the memories with him, what he had with him for the last 40 years. Monsieur Hamel that day, he took the class in such a way that he wanted to give everything, all his knowledge to his students. That was very emotional for other students and also for Franz. Even the children who were there present that day in the class, they were also not moving their lips. It was a very unusual thing that day. And he could understand that what Monsieur Hamel was going through. What would happen to a teacher who is forced to leave the school after 40 years of his service? Franz could hear the packing of the trunks by Monsieur Hamel's sister who was upstairs, because Monsieur Hamel is supposed to leave the country the next day. He is not even allowed to stay in the country. Okay. With this when all the activities were going inside the classroom that time, suddenly the church clock struck 12 and the trumpets of the German soldiers sounded. That time, the German soldiers, the Prussian soldiers, they were drilling by the school building. Suddenly, Monsieur Hamel stood up. He was about to say something, but something choked him. The fear choked him and he could not say a word. So, he had the other weapon, the chalk. He went to the board, he took his chalk and he wrote on the board, Vive la France. Vive la France, which means long live France. And after this emotional moment, Monsieur Hamel addressed the class for the last time and said the class is dismissed. This is the story of the last lesson, which shows that how important language is to us, how language can unite us, and why you should not postpone your studies, your learnings for some other time, for tomorrow, because you don't know that tomorrow may not come, and you may not get a chance again to learn. So whatever time you're getting, enjoy the moment, live the moment, and take all the learnings from this moment. Do not skip it for tomorrow. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it will help you to know the lesson better. If you would like to read the story, you can download it from Google, the NCERT PDF of the story, so that you can understand the story in a better way. Thank you so much. I'll come with my next video some other time and it will be informed to you. You can follow the school website for the more needs. Thank you. Thank you so much.